Does everyone see my screen? See thumbs ups? I love it. All right. Welcome, everyone, to this session on building a stellar resume and cover letter for consulting interview. I'm your host for the evening. My name is Mo Shafi, and I'm super excited to share some knowledge here about this important topic. All right, before we get started, who am I and why you should listen to me? There's plenty of advice online. Why should you be spending this 30 minutes with me? I worked at McKinsey and Company for about 5 years. I joined as a business analyst and I stayed until I was an engagement manager. During that time, I also left to pursue an MBA from Stanford and a degree in public policy and economic development from the Harvard Kennedy School. And I love coaching for case interviews and entire preparation for consulting interviews. I've coached hundreds, I would say close to 1,000, but not yet at 1,000. But my claim to fame is one of my coachees is now a partner at McKinsey. So that's how long I've been coaching. I'm passionate about coaching, enhancing diversity in consulting firm and the office. I was a non-typical kind of consulting analyst, non-traditional background, as they call it. So I love to see kind of fellow folks joining the consulting industry from all sorts of backgrounds. And that's what I love doing, coaching at Leland and outside of Leland. And just a quick pitch. So those are some of the reviews from folks that I've worked with that have landed jobs at MBB firms and beyond. Of course, I worked at McKinsey for 5 years. So I've had tremendous experience reviewing a lot of resumes, scoring them, and giving feedback to candidates on their resume. And that's what I'll try to kind of share with you this afternoon. So we'll start with the resume style and consistency. We'll talk a little bit about resume length and structure. Then we'll jump into the resume content, what you should have on the resume itself. We will then talk about how to make your resume stand out, cover letter strategy, and final tips and suggestions. Let's dive in. All right. The first and most important thing that I want you to take from this session is that your resume must be absolutely consistent. You need to be absolutely paranoid about every single detail in your resume. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But as an ex-consultant, so as an engagement manager at McKinsey, our eyes as consultants are trained on spotting inconsistencies, especially at the EM level and above. We see hundreds and hundreds of slides per day, and literally our job is to make sure the slides are polished, clear, and consistent. So we notice the tiniest mistakes, double spaces, misalignment in where sentences start, inconsistent sentence structure between the bullet points, and so on and so forth. So even if you think that your resume is perfect and everything is great, like double and triple check it, print it, read it word by word, bring a ruler, make sure every single thing in your resume is flawless. No typos, no formatting errors. It has to be absolutely perfect. So again, as I mentioned, senior consultants are quick to spot misalignment inconsistencies, and immediately it's kind of a red flag that you didn't put enough effort into perfecting the one page that is supposed to tell everything about you. So absolute obsessive attention to detail is needed. Read it again, read it a third time, line by line, cover it, look at the margins, look at the bullet points, make sure everything is absolutely flawless. It's 100% in your control. You need to spend every single moment kind of making sure that it's absolutely perfect. Here are some of the elements that you should look for when we talk about consistency. So the first thing is spacing. Spacing is very, very important. So, when you have a section in your resume, how much spacing is between that, the section title and then the first bullet, how much spacing is between the different bullet points. It has to be consistent throughout the resume. And it will be super, super easy for someone to notice any gaps in the logic of your spacing. So make sure that it's absolutely perfect. The second thing is alignment. So all the lines on your resume need to start from the exact same point. All the bullet points are perfectly aligned. You can't have a bullet point that starts over here and then next to it a bullet point that just moved a little bit to the right. That doesn't work. It reflects poorly on the candidate. And when you're in that position and you're reviewing hundreds of resumes, it is super easy. Like, it's the first thing you look at. You see the resume, you spot all the inconsistencies. The next thing is font and formatting. Again, you want to use one font type throughout the entire resume. It should be black and white, no colors, no styles, no innovation. Font size should be uniform. You can maybe in the titles, you bold it a little bit. Maybe you can use italics to highlight certain areas or like location or the degree name. But, you want it to be the same font size, the same font type throughout. The final thing in consistency is the sentence structure. So you want to start each bullet point in the same way. So if it starts with an action verb in the past tense, you want to make that consistent in all of your bullet points. You cannot have one bullet point that starts with a noun, another bullet point that starts with a verb. You want to be as consistent as possible. So these are some of the elements that are kind of table stakes. Your resume has to be, free of any misalignment issues, free of any double spaces, typos, etc. Those are like very, very important and reflect poorly on the candidate if they didn't get them right, because you have all the time in the world to review your resume and perfect it before you submit it. So make sure that you take the time to review it. Next thing is resume length and structure. We'll have time at the end for questions. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the comments and I'll be happy to address them right after. All right. How should you structure your resume? Your resume needs to be a single page. I know you had a lot of great accomplishments. Everyone really wants to kind of extend their resume to 2 pages or 3 pages. For consulting jobs, you really, really want to limit it to 1 page. It is not an expectation, but it also reflects your ability to summarize and condense information. You can submit like 4 pages, but no one is gonna read them, right? And it's gonna reflect poorly on your ability to communicate your story very effectively and in a condensed manner. So, 1 page, trust me, whatever it is that you've accomplished, even if you have so many years of experience in a PhD in publications, you can limit it to 1 page. The second thing is that you need to allocate, you think of your resume as 1 page of real estate, and you want to allocate that real estate to the most important things in your background. If you are fresh out of undergrad, you don't have a lot of experience, maybe a resume or 2, your education section and extracurriculars are going to be kind of the biggest sections. So you want to allocate as much space for those as possible. if you have graduated 4 or 5 years ago, or you're out of business school, you want to allocate most of the space for your work experience. So think about how much time you spent in each one of these sections and try to allocate proportional space to that section. You spent 6 years doing a PhD, so that should probably be a good chunk in your resume. You did one summer internship at that place, it probably should, unless it's a super important internship, say in consulting or at a known firm, it shouldn't be more than 2 or 3 lines on your resume. So keep that in mind. The common sections in the resume are, of course, education, work experience, leadership, volunteer experience, and then other additional miscellaneous. And that's where you can put everything else: languages, interests, hobbies, and so on. But these are kind of the 4 sections that I see typically in resumes. And we'll talk a little bit about those in detail. All right. So moving to the resume content. So you need to put yourself in the shoes of an interviewer or a recruiter at a consulting firm. What are they trying to test? They're trying to see if you have the skill set needed to excel in consulting. What is a good consultant? What kind of skills or abilities do they have? They're smart, so they have intellectual horsepower, and they're not theoretically smart. They can get to the ground and achieve impact. They're not just a PhD philosopher. They know how to apply that knowledge and that intelligence in a practical way to achieve impact. The third thing is they have leadership, entrepreneurial drive. They're self-starters, they're resourceful, and so on and so forth. The fourth thing is they're problem solvers. So you can give them a complicated problem they've never seen before, and then they can rely on first principles in breaking it down, developing a solution, and making a recommendation. And then the final thing is that they're good at stakeholder management. So they can work with diverse groups of people, lead them, communicate clearly to them, and so on and so forth. Without jumping into any confidential details about any of the consulting firms or how they do their evaluations internally, this is essentially what they're looking for when they read your resume. They typically have like a scoring scale from 0, 1, and 2, where 0 is like, nope, you don't have that skill set. 2 is you're absolutely exceptional. And 1 is you meet the requirements. And basically, they try to look for evidence about these skill sets. And they're not going to spend a lot of time reading your resume. So you need to make it as clear as possible for them that, hey, I have this skill set. Hey, I'm really smart. Hey, I know how to manage people. Hey, I'm a problem solver. So you need to make it as clear as possible for them so that they can immediately see the signs as they scan the resume. And again, like when MBB consultants scan resumes, usually happens late at night. They already had a long day of work. It was 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. And then the recruiter just drops like 100 resumes on my desk. And then they want them reviewed by the morning. So they're not going to spend more than a minute, probably less, looking for very specific things and keywords to judge whether you have the skill set or not, and whether you have a strong resume or not. So let's dig deeper into each one of these buckets and understand what kind of things they're looking for in these buckets to demonstrate them. So intellectual horsepower, they want to see evidence that you're smart. You want your resume to scream at them, hey, I'm really, really smart. And that could come in all sorts of flavors. It could be your high GPA in college. It could be, top of your class ranking. It could be an impressive SAT, a GMAT score. It could be scholarship, fellowship, prestigious research projects, and so on and so forth. There are so many different ways to communicate that, but it needs to be very clear. Because when I can't find any evidence of that, I'm going to assume the worst. I'm going to give you either, a 0 or maybe in best cases a 1. For example, if you don't list your GMAT score and you don't list your GPA and you don't list any, scholarship, fellowships, and so on and so forth, I'm not going to find any evidence that shows, you're super smart. And then the form is asking me to kind of give you a score on how smart you are. So I'm not going to make assumptions, and I'm going to give you the lower end score on the scoring criteria. So try to list like a thing or two that tells me that you're smart. Like, hey, here's my GPA. It's like a 3.7 or 3.8. Hey, I was top of my class. I was valedictorian. I have this amazing GMAT score, and so on and so forth. I will, that's typically the first thing that I scan for in the resume is like, okay, how's their academic achievement? And if I don't see any evidence, I don't see a GPA, then especially if you're out of undergrad, I would assume that it's below 3 or below 3.2 or so. And I'm not going to give you a high score on that metric. I'll take some questions. I see some questions here. Should I put case competition and DI programs 1 week of virtual events? That could be a one-liner in the miscellaneous section. Are the resumes scanned by computers initially? At least at McKinsey, it wasn't. Every resume was read by 2 actual human beings at least, and their scores are compared to make sure that the process is fair. Are test scores as relevant when you have been in the workforce for 15 years? The answer is no, definitely not. Scores are relevant if you are, out of undergrad, 4 or 5 years of work experience, maybe out of MBA. But beyond that, the selection criteria is slightly different, and it's less about grades and more about your accomplishments and impact at work. All right, let's get back to it, and we'll stop later for more questions. Next topic or next area that they want to see evidence for is real world application. So what they're trying to filter for is, pure intellectual academics who are like super smart math geniuses, but, have no idea how the world works. So they want to see how you applied your skill set to a real life situation. For example, you're a civil engineer, you did like research in civil engineering, for example. They want to see a practical project. Say you went to Africa and did some volunteering there, you built some structures there or helped the local communities in ways or others. They want to see an internship where you had a significant impact. They want to see maybe you started something, a company or nonprofit or something of that sort, and you actually had an impact in those places. So the key word here is impact. You want to show that, like, hey, I did this thing, it didn't exist before, where it was really horrible before. I came in, I did a bunch of things, and it had impact. That shows them that you are not just an intellectual, theoretical person, but you can actually hit the ground running, roll up your sleeves, and get things done. And that's another important skill set that they want to see in consultants. All right. The next item is leadership. So they want to see evidence of leadership. And this is a very important one. They want to see people who, were presidents of clubs, starting new companies, leading teams, and so on and so forth. If you were in college, that could be, being class president, being the president of your fraternity or sorority or a club or whatever it is. And they want to see, more kind of quantitative impact, like, hey, I managed the budget of like $30,000, or the club had 400 members, or we grew that club from 20 members to 200 members within 1 year. So not only just like showing kind of hey, I was a leader, but no, I actually like tying it back to the impact piece, where like, hey, I was an effective leader. I led this organization and I had an impact. And again, like there's no like set number of ways to show this. Every experience is different, but you want to show evidence of that. Next is problem solving skills. So they want to see your qualitative and quantitative problem solving skills. Qualitative is basically you worked on a vague problem, like there's an issue in the community. You potentially did interviews with folks to understand what is causing that problem, or an issue at the school or at work, where you worked with people to discover a problem through listening, interviewing, noticing things, and so on. Quantitative, on the other hand, is working with numbers. Basically, you found a data set. Say you're trying to solve crime in a city. You found the data set. You made the plots and did the analysis, and you made recommendations based on that. And you need to think a little bit about your work experience and your academic background. If you are coming from a PhD in mathematics, probably they have very good evidence, or they assume that you're good at math and quantitative stuff, and you want to highlight more your qualitative problem solving. On the other hand, if you're like a humanities major, or you're a teacher, or of non-quantitative fields, then you want to prove to them that like, hey, I actually can crunch the number. So that's where like kind of your background determines what you need to highlight in your resume. You need to think about what are the assumptions that they're making about me. I'm a PhD student, then they assume I'm theoretical. I have been in the workforce for say 10, 15 years. So they assume that I cannot work super hard, or I cannot stay up late and travel and do the things that consultants do, and try to show them evidence kind of contrary to their assumptions. That's the goal of the resume. You put yourself in their shoes and then think, if they read this resume in like 1 minute, what kind of assumptions or concerns they might have, and how can I proactively show them the evidence that disputes their claims or assumptions. All right, the final one is showing cross-functional collaboration. You highlight the experience where you manage diverse teams, you worked with different departments, different stakeholders, worked with different professors, say, in school, just showing that you can handle people. You can, have clients, you can work with them in a professional setting, communicate with them effectively, and achieve a common goal. All right, so that's the resume content. I'll quickly go through the remaining section. So making your resume stand out, be explicit and quantifiable. This is extremely important. I see this all the time when I review resumes. I've reviewed, as I mentioned, thousands of resumes over the years. People mention things that are important to them, but are very hard to know how significant they are to the other person. For example, you list that you had the McCormick whatever scholarship at your school. I have no idea whether that's like, once in a lifetime honor, or that's like a common thing that is given to a third of the class. So as much as possible, try to quantify your achievements. You were rated high in school or at work, or you gained an honor, quantify it. Say this honor is given to top 5% of students, or I was rated X and that rating at work is given to the top 10% of employees. That helps me kind of understand where you stand compared to your peers. And it's okay to make estimates here. So, like, think about your class. You're the only one who got that scholarship. There are 100 other students who applied, so it's given to 1% of the applicants. So try to make estimates like that. Even if they're directional, they can help the reader understand the context and the importance of your achievements. Similarly, if you've managed budgets, led teams, managed profit and loss statements, whatever it is, try to quantify it. How much did it increase by? How many members did you have at the beginning of the club? How many members did you have at the end? And so on and so forth. Numbers is what sets you apart. Everyone can say words. Everyone can say, I'm great and I did this and I led this. But when you put it in numbers, you actually make it very relatable and people can understand what exactly you did. And then showcase the right type of experience. As we mentioned, think about what consultants do and try to show them things that they understand. For example, if you have a PhD, they're worried potentially about your ability to work in teams. So try to demonstrate that in your, say, PhD experience. Say that, like, you led the lab teams, you had a couple of undergrad researchers under you that you supported, and so on and so forth, to show them, to kind of calm their concern that they have about whatever career path that you're coming from. If you've worked in IT before, for example, or risk or transaction, try to use less technical jargon and explain it in business terms. What was the profit that you impacted? How much revenue did the company grow by as a result of your effort? And so on and so forth. Instead of like getting into jargons like, oh, I helped them implement this technical system, no one is going to understand that. They would think that you're not able to communicate in a language that people can understand, and it might affect your chances of getting in. All right. Make your resume stand out. Overhype yourself, but don't lie. Again, I always tell my coachees is you need to overhype yourself. Like a super excited friend about your future who wouldn't lie, but would go like every extra possible mile to get you hyped up. An example of that, you led like a random club, it had 20 members, and then it increased to 40 members for 1 year. Like, make that super exciting. Don't just like list it as like president of whatever club. Just say like, started the club, or like you revitalized the club and grew the membership by 100% from 20 member to 40 members by inviting new participants, by posting marketing materials around campus, and so on and so forth. So get super excited about yourself, mix humility with confidence, and go the extra mile. Don't lie, don't fabricate, but try to hype yourself up. Try to quantify things, as we mentioned, rankings, percentage of people that got the honor, percent impact, and so on and so forth. But don't lie, don't fabricate, stories that didn't happen. But think of yourself as a friend of yours who's super, excited about you and thinks that you're cool and wants to hype up your profile to others. What would they do? And try to do that in your resume. Add a personal touch. At the last line in the resume, you can add your, interests, quirky facts about you, whether it's like a TV show that you like. I've seen people like list their favorite, say, kombucha, or favorite juice, or hiking spot, or whatever it is, just to add a personal touch. Hey, I'm not like the robot that I that you think I am. I actually like have a life. I I have hobbies, and I'm pretty interesting. And you would be surprised how many times like that starts the conversation. I personally list that I love The Office in the resume, um, and I always start with like, "Hey, who's your favorite character in The Office?" That usually goes at the very bottom of your resume. Like you can put like personal interest and list like a few like hiking, kayaking, whatever, and kombucha. That could make you stand out. Don't pick something that is controversial, um, drinking, or like something that might put a question mark on your profile. Pick something that is like non-controversial, slightly funny, adds a personal touch to your profile. And this is the most common mistake that I see. Remove anything generic. No one wants to see great attention to detail, work under pressure, team player, whatever it is. If anyone in the world can claim it without evidence, it shouldn't be in your resume. You should only list the things that are unique to yourself and no one else can claim it. You work well under pressure? Great. Show me evidence for that. Say that you had a tight deadline and you delivered an amazing product or whatever it is in a tight deadline, and you did a great job and got recognized for it. Great attention to detail. Show me an example of that. What did you pay attention to that resulted in great impact? So avoid these things. Team player? No. Tell me how many team members you led, in what context, what did you guys achieve, and so on and so forth. I see those all the time in resumes, unfortunately, and they're a huge turnoff. So please don't do that. Also, don't list common skills like Microsoft Office, Windows, etc. Those are like table stakes. Everyone knows how to use them. You can list something more specific, like building financial models using Microsoft Excel. Okay, that's a skill. But like just Microsoft Excel in itself is not a skill. All right, cover letter. Cover letter is not gonna make or break your resume. If you have an interesting story to tell, use it to tell that story. It's more of a formality. Honestly, I just like go to it if there is something interesting about the resume. Say like there's like a 5-year gap, or there's a sudden drop of your grades if you're in college, whatever it is. I try to go there and see if you mention anything there. But by the time people get to typically people read the resume first, then they go to the cover letter. By the time they go to the cover letter, they have a very good hypothesis about whether they're gonna pass you to interview or not. So unless there's something amazing there, it's probably not gonna change their decision. Examples of things that you can put there: explain your long-term goals. Just know that they're going to be very, very common. Like everyone who goes into consulting want to like end up in the industry or want to do something that is related to consulting exits. And they love the fast-paced environment, whatever it is. So just like put yourself in the shoes of the reader and think that they're going to read 300 resumes and cover letters that says the same thing. So don't make it long. Don't fill it with like generic stuff like, oh, I've heard about McKinsey and it's the only thing I want to do, and so on and so forth. It is a good place to list any office or practice preference if you want to work in New York, Boston, whatever, because you have family connection, or you want to are applying to an office outside the US. That's a great place to explain why, and mention all the people that you've talked to, the events that you went to, and so on, to show interest in that specific firm. Avoid repetition. We talked about that. Tailor and personalize your letter. It shouldn't be like the same letter going to every consulting firm. Add a little touch. Who did you talk to at that firm? What information sessions? What really like brought you to BCG? Is there something specific about the work they do, the practices that are there, their presence that makes it appealing? And continue to improve. So your resume and your cover letter should be and evolving documents. You apply, you get feedback, you show it to people, you keep adding and removing stuff, and keep refining them all the time. Final thoughts. Consultants will read your resume in less than a minute. I promise you, I've done that. I've been there. It's like a very, very quick thing. Like, is this person smart? GPA, SAT, where did they go to school? I know that, that doesn't sound great, but unfortunately that's what happens. I'm sure like all consulting firms say like, oh, we treat every resume with like so much, whatever. It's not like that. They give it to people who spend like, who are overworked and have to go through it in very short time. So they will look for like clear indicators. Like they went to top school, they're top of their class, they're valedictorian, their GPA is high, SAT, GMAT, scholarship, whatever. Did they lead clubs? Great. Did they have some internship? Okay, what did they do there? Okay, great. Pass. And so on. So you need to make these things very, very explicit and very, very clear. Print your resume, read it with a ruler, word by word before submitting it. Add numbers, as we mentioned, quantify your achievements, and use the cover letter for net new content. Don't just like repeat your resume. They've already read your resume. And now my pitch to you, I offer very limited seats in my at Leland. I help candidates in MBB interviews. So everything from finance and economics review, math, frameworks, consulting, casing. I can do by the hour, or you can purchase the package. I also do an MBB resume review. I review your resume, 2 rounds of edits. I give you feedback. I'll tell you how I would score it if I was at McKinsey reviewing your resume for a job, and then go line by line and give you detailed edits. And then at the end, I do a second round where I review your resume in detail. So we do 2 rounds of interviews, and I give you feedback form with a scorecard on how would you do if you were to submit this resume. Feel free to scan the QR code. I'll also put my profile here. Again, I work with, I have a full-time job, so I try to work with few people, typically 2 to 3 people at a time. And then I close my my profile when the spots are filled. So feel free to schedule an intro call with me for free and get to know you better. And super excited to be working with you in the future. All right, so how's startup experience rated? Very highly. Startups typically shows that you're a self-starter, that you're resourceful, and so on. So very highly rated, I would say, in consulting. Are these strong scores grades as relevant to those 2 to 3 years in the industry experience in other firms as well? Not as important, but good to have, especially if you're out of MBA. Think of it like if they're helping your case, add them. If they're not helping your case, try to think about what else can I show them that shows them that I'm smart. Like, oh, I was at KPMG and I was actually the top analyst there. All right, that works. I don't need to know your SAT scores then. But it's just like a bucket that they need to kind of check. So give them evidence. What section should the personal touch go into? The last section. You can just add 1 bullet point, personal interest, and put all the interesting quirks that you have there. Could you go back a slide for a moment? Too late, my friend. But feel free to email me or send me a text on Leland, and I'll be happy to answer that. What would be your best advice for a freshman from a non-target interested in pursuing a career in consulting? First, just drop the non-target word. It's not as important. It used to be important like ages ago. Now consulting is trying to diversify. Less so in investment banking. They're still stuck to target, non-target. Focus on your GPA. Focus on your studies. Do 1 or 2 extracurricular activities and do them very well. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. So you want to be like president of one club or two clubs, and do something meaningful there. Like increase the number of events, host like interesting speakers, things of that sort would significantly improve your chances versus just doing a billion clubs and and not doing anything meaningful in any of them. So that's it. Grades and extracurriculars. Try maybe to start something on the side, like a business or like a consulting service for local businesses. That could help. Of all of these, check out. Are you guaranteed an interview? Most likely, yes. So typically, you probably need like 2 out of the 3 areas to, or 3 out of the 5 areas to be in good standing, and then you get the interview. But again, it depends on which office you're applying to, how many positions they have for that office in that given year, and how many people are applying. But typically, if you follow this, it is relatively easy to get an interview if you follow this this recipe. What do you consider the most important element of the resume? Again, it depends on how fresh out of undergrad or grad school you are. If the more recent your graduation is, the more relevant your school work is. The older you are, the more important your work experience. I have to go. Thank you. Have a good day. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Just curious, the strict deferral system. I'm not sure. Can you elaborate? So they have. When I left McKinsey, it was about 18 months of deferral at McKinsey, and I don't think it was strict. I know at least 2 or 3 other people who deferred for more than that. You need to get an exception, but it's allowed. Also, do they have vibe check process? Nope, they don't have a vibe check process. There is in the interview process, like they go through the personal leadership experience. Different firms call it different things, but they go through the standard behavioral interview. They used to call it like, oh, if I get stuck with you at an airport, would I like to spend time with you? Turns out that results in a lot of bias and people ending up like hiring people who are similar to them. All right, referral, not deferral. At McKinsey, referral didn't play a significant weight. Again, like if you're a smart candidate and if you're doing well and you're going to be a great consultant, they're not going to say like, oh no, you didn't work with our partner. You have to like get 3 referrals for us to accept you. No, they will like chase you literally. So focus less on like the referrals and networking, etc., and focus more on the things in your control. Perfect resume, great cover letter, killing it in the interview. That's it. That's all you need. I knew one at McKinsey when I applied, and I think I did well. All right. Do you know any internship programs underclassmen can apply to in consulting? Yes. McKinsey has one. I believe BCG and others have one. Typically, it's for folks from underrepresented backgrounds or economically disadvantaged backgrounds and minorities. Go to any website and check them. I know at least at McKinsey DC, we had like things for freshmen, for sophomores, and for third years as well. If you graduate, are you unable to get internships, or do internship just accept students? I believe if you graduate, you're unable to get internship. Again, I don't think internships are as important. At least most firms, I would say, except during 2022, which was a crazy year. Most firms think of the internship as just an interview process. So you can just apply to a full-time position and you might be better off instead of going through an internship and then getting an offer and so on. The goal of the internship is to capture some students who are likely to go elsewhere, and try to kind of lure them in with a consulting lifestyle, give them some work to give them an idea about what the job is like. and then give them an offer at the end. If you know consulting is what you want to do, no internship is needed. Just apply for a full-time position.
Also, are we allowed to speak verbally, or should we use the chat?
Feel free to do whatever makes you happy, my friend.
Um,
Tell me.
Sorry. Go to Sharon. I'll be.
All right, Sharon. I'm a newly admitted MBA student. I heard about summer programs that potentially have hiring opportunities for summer internships. Okay. Do you have any insight on those summer exploratory programs? Yes, a lot of firms have them. It's typically like a week or a few weeks, not consulting work, but like mostly like workshops and programs and whatever to get you introduced to consulting. Highly recommend it. Some of them come with direct interviewing. So if you get into them and you apply for an internship the following year, you don't have to go through resume screening. Sometimes you can land an interview directly. So I highly recommend them, and they will give you an idea about what is consulting, and you might network and learn a little bit about the interview process. Amazing. I know we're 20 minutes over time. Cannot. All right. One last question from KH. Sorry, Kenneth.
So you said that internships are more to just capture students. So they aren't the best entry-level position. They don't have to be internships to be entry-level positions. Is that right?
Correct.
So what are the
ahead.
titles? How can I tell what's a good entry-level position?
Yeah, so fresh. I'll tell you about McKinsey, and they're kind of equivalent names that other firms. Happy to elaborate. If you're fresh out of undergrad or have less than 4 years of experience, undergrad or master's degree, or have less than 4 years of experience, then the business analyst program is best for you. If you have a PhD, or 4 years of experience, or have a professional degree like law or medicine, then you apply directly to an associate. Some offices have junior associate. And then unless you have, significant experience post graduation, say like 10 years or so, then you can apply for an engagement manager or an associate principal. But typically they like to see people who've done consulting in some way, because it's hard to kind of gain the skill set if you haven't done consulting. So the two positions are business analyst and associate. Like I would say 90% of folks start in those two entry level positions. An associate is not entry level. It's for like experienced professionals, MBAs, people with advanced degrees.
I see. Well, that's very much appreciated. I was afraid I'd lost my opportunity after I graduated. Lost access to entry level positions once I graduated. So thank you.
No, definitely not. I've seen folks do, years of experience, and then they apply as an experienced professional, and then they land either in the BA program or in the associate program. I know quite a lot of folks.
Thank you.
All right, folks, thank you so much. If you want to work with me, here's my coach profile. Looking forward to meeting as many of you in the future. Best of luck. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Is it Wednesday?